Good day to you, Year 9, and welcome to Week 7. This is Lesson 1 of Week 7, where we are going to be still keeping with the theme of plants. We're going to be looking at one of the ways in which substances move through the plant, which we did mention in last week's lesson. We're going to be looking at a process called transpiration. Okay, so last week we spoke about two methods in which substances move around a plant. You've got transpiration, which is the movement of water, and we have translocation, which is the movement of food substances. Okay, so before we begin, we're just going to have a little recap of a structure in the plants called stomata, which is going to be important in today's lesson. We did speak about them last week. Remember, stomata is the hole in which the gases move in and out of the leaf, and the hole, the stomata, is surrounded by those two guard cells. So some questions to think about. You don't need to write them down. You just need to think about them, so you can pause the video at the end after I've read them out, and then you can think about what the answers will be. The questions are: number one, what gases are exchanged? So what gases go in and out of the stomata? Number two, why do you think the stomata need to close? Number three, why are they on the underside of the leaf? And number four, what would the climate affect the number of stomata? So can you pause the video and have a think about the answers to those four questions? Okay, so hopefully you've had to think about those. They are things that have been discussed in previous lessons, apart from number four. So question number one, what gases are exchanged? So carbon dioxide will move into the leaf through the stomata, and oxygen will leave the leaf through the stomata. Number two, why would the stomata need to close? That is going to be to do with today's lesson, if it is losing too much water. Number three, why are they on the underside of the leaf? That's to reduce the amount of water loss because it's not being hit by the sun. And number four, would the climate affect the number of stomata? Yes, it would. We're going to look at that later, but it tends to be that plants in hot countries will have less stomata, so less water is lost. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at and what we need to know is about transpiration. So we need to state that transpiration is the evaporation of water vapor from the leaves. We need to talk about the function of the stomata, and we also need to be able to calculate a mean number of stomata on a leaf, which is why in the first slide calculator was on the list of equipment. Obviously you can use your phones for their calculator function. For 5 to 6 we need to be able to describe how that movement of water, that transpiration, happens. And also we need to describe how the opening and closing of stomata is controlled by guard cells. For 7 to 8 we need to evaluate the model for transpiration, and that's going to be mostly linked to tomorrow's lesson, where we're going to look at a piece of equipment which can measure the rate of transpiration. Okay, so we've got a picture of a cell on the bottom left hand side. Hopefully we recognize this specialized cell. It is one of the ones that you do need to know. Is a root hair cell that can be found in the roots of plants. Quick thinking question, so you don't need to write it down again. What is the role of this cell, and can you remember how is it adapted for that role? So pause the video, try and remember what the role is and how it's adapted for it. Okay, so hopefully you've had to think about that, and hopefully remember that the role of the cell is for the movement of water into the plant from the soil, and also minerals. And how is it adapted for this role? big adaptation is obviously the long projection that comes out, which increases surface area. Okay, so transpiration. We're going to start off with what transpiration actually is, kind of the definition for transpiration, and then we're going to look more about how it actually works. So the evaporation, so remember that is where substances go from a liquid to a gas. The evaporation of water from leaves keeps them cool, but also helps move water, and in that water there will be those mineral ions. And the flow of water into a root, up the stem and out of the leaves is called transpiration. So can you get that last sentence down as a definition for transpiration? The flow of water into a root, up the stem and out of the leaves is called transpiration. You can pause the video now. Okay, so here's a picture just to put it into context. So you can see that at the bottom you've got the water moving in through the root hair cells into the root. It's then going up the stem and then is lost through the leaves by evaporation. And that is transpiration in a nutshell. Okay. So we're going to look at how that water is actually lost from the leaves, and it's all to do with the stomata. Now the stomata are really important because they allow gases in and out of the leaf, and those gases are needed for photosynthesis. One gas is needed for photosynthesis. So the stomata are open because it needs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to diffuse into those air spaces in that mesophyll layer that we've spoken about in previous lessons. And that's happening, it's diffusion, it's happening down a concentration gradient. So from a higher concentration outside the leaf to a lower concentration inside the leaf. Now, whilst this is happening, a different gas, oxygen, is being made in photosynthesis. So that's starting to increase in concentration inside the leaf. So like with carbon dioxide, it will diffuse along the concentration gradient. So it will actually diffuse out of the leaf. And that is happening through the stomata. Now the stomata will open and close. They're not just always there as a whole. That hole will get bigger or smaller, and that is controlled by the guard cells. So if you did not know that carbon dioxide will diffuse into the leaf, oxygen will diffuse out of the leaf, then pop that down. But what is important is the bottom sentence about the size of the stomata being controlled by the guard cells. So if you could pause the video now and put down what you need to know. Okay, now because those stomata are open, it also lets water out, and we're going to be looking at that in a minute. First of all though, we need to be able to calculate mean stomatas, mean number of stomata on a leaf. So in a practical, a student measures the number of stomata per millimetre squared of leaf surface, and you would do that quite a basic way of doing that is just to put some nail varnish on the underside of a leaf and then peel that off, put it under a microscope, and you can actually count the number of holes. And when they did that, they found their counts were 250, 280, 265, 245, 270, 255 and 290. So what I would like you to do is calculate the mean number of stomata. Can you do that to 3 significant figures? That's going to be worth a point. Make sure you show you're working, and can you also make sure that you put a unit at the end of your answer. So I'm going to give you a point for the correct number, a point for 3 significant figures, and a point for the correct unit. So pause the video now and calculate the mean number of stomata. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at that, and hopefully we found that the total of adding them all together, because remember that's how you calculate a mean, you add all the numbers together and divide by how many there are. So the total is 1,855. Now if I take that number and divide by 7, because there's 7 readings, you'll get 265, 3 significant figures, and that's per millimetre squared. So if you got 265 per millimetre squared, then that will be all 3 marks. So give yourself a tick for each correct thing that you did. Okay, so we're going to go through the stages of transpiration now. The first thing I'd like you to do, taking up about half of a page of A4 at least, so you can go bigger than that. Can you just draw a really straightforward diagram of a plant that includes the roots, the stem and some leaves? We're going to go through the process stage by stage. We're going to be starting with the leaves and then working our way down to the roots. So you're going to want to put your plant on either the left or the right hand side of your page. So pause the video and pop that diagram down now, please. Okay, so what we're going to do is go through that process. As I say, there will be more information than you need, so you just need to reduce that into a sentence that you can put in the appropriate place. And we're going to start with the leaves. Okay, now like if you're drinking through a straw, when you're drinking at the top of the straw actually causes more of your drink to go up the straw. So in the leaves you've got constant evaporation through stomata. Now that is happening all of the time when the stomata are open. Okay, you can see that there's another picture of a stomata, what they look like on the underside of the leaf, and that water vapor is just evaporating from the air spaces into the atmosphere. So can you pop down just a sentence that summarizes that information, and you're going to want it on your leaf. Okay, so we're going to move on to so we're going to look at stage 2 now, and we're looking at the stem now. So as that water is evaporating from the leaves, it's actually pulling more water up through the xylem to take its place. And remember, the xylem vessels, made of xylem cells, are the vessels that transport water around the plant. So you can pause the video now, pop in near your stem, that as the water leaves the leaves, evaporates through the leaves, more water is pulled up through the xylem. Now that actually creates what we call the transpiration stream. So because the water is leaving the leaves, it's pulling more up through the xylem, and as we look at in the next stage, more water is going into the roots. So the whole process is a transpiration stream. Okay, so the last stage, we're now at the roots. So water has left the leaves, pulling up more water up the xylem. So that means that in the roots, more water can go from the soil into the roots. And that's because the water is leaving the roots up the stem, which creates a low concentration of water molecules. So water can move from the soil into the roots. And that happens through that process called osmosis that we spoke about in one of our first lessons. So can you pause the video now, have a read through the information and pop down in a sentence what is happening in the roots. So what I want you to do now, just to see whether we've understood what it was that I have been going through about transpiration, I'd like you for 4 marks, so 4 key points in there, explain how water moves from the roots and reaches the leaves. So it's going to be worth 4 marks. I've put some key points just to kind of remind you of some of the important information. Can you pause the video and answer that question in full, please? Okay, so grab a purple pen or a different colour pen and let's see whether you got 4 marks worth of information. So if you have spoken about water evaporating from the leaf through the stomata, that is going to be worth a mark. If you've then said that more water is pulled, sorry, that should be pulled, not peeled, is pulled up through the xylem, then that will be worth a mark. If you said that water moves into the roots by osmosis, that's going to be worth a mark. And if you have said that this is a transpiration stream, or the constant movement of water is the transpiration stream, then that would be worth a mark. If you have said in the roots that it is going from high water concentration in the soil to low water concentration in the root, that would be worth a mark in an exam. That will be a good point to put in as well. So let's see how many points you got out of 4 on talking about transpiration, the movement of water. And if you need to add anything to your answer, please do so. So that's it for this lesson. It's a pretty straightforward lesson. We just need to know what transpiration is and how it works. In tomorrow's lesson, we're going to be looking at a piece of equipment that we use so that we can actually measure the rate of transpiration, so how quickly that water is moving up from the roots through the stem in the xylem and then evaporating out through the leaves. So for 1 to 4, hopefully now we can say what transpiration is and calculate a mean. For 5 to 6s, hopefully we can describe that movement of water. We're going to talk about the opening and closing of stomata next lesson. And then also for 7 to 8, that's going to tie in with tomorrow's lesson, where we're going to be looking at how the rate of transpiration can be controlled. So from this lesson, we just need to know the stages of transpiration, how it works, and that we call it the transpiration stream. So I hope you have a lovely day. You'll hear from me tomorrow in the next lesson. Stay safe and goodbye.